everyone and welcome to the anime Seriea, and this episode was a ultimate dive bomber. That's right, episode 11 of the Astra Lost in Space anime series was amazing. One of the best episodes that we've had from the series thus far. The emotions that were running high in this episode, whether that was from Charlce or Kanata or even the crew, were all magnificent to watch and display. We had edginess, we had anger, sadness, regret. We had camaraderie, if that's even an emotion. I don't know. It was all great. The expressions, the animation to go with it, the music that followed, and the voice acting all blended together to make such an emotional, impactful episode that was just all round amazing. So let's start with Charlce. And before we do, can someone just give this guy a hug already? We learned last week that he's the king's clone, and his upbringing was absolutely terrible. Now, I know most of the crew's pasts are pretty bad, but none of them had the idea of being a backup drilled into their very soul. He was told constantly that his life was only for the king, and the saddest part is that although he was treated badly, he didn't even see it himself. He thought that every time, the king called for him, it was him being useful towards the king. If he wasn't useful, he had no value. That was his mindset. And once he was thrown in confinement, this is backed up because he felt like he had no value. And what happened when the king told him to die along with the rest of the crew was even sadder because he felt happy that he could actually be of use to someone. Now, Charlce's character does show quite a lot of sadness from this episode. And all he wanted to do was to be useful and to see the outside world and experience life beyond the castle. So he does have a dream, and he actually achieved that, and this episode actually drove that home. He starts off in this episode acting quite edgy and quite sort of villainous, saying that he didn't care about anyone, he doesn't have any friends, and by the end of it he's thinking, oh my god, I've actually, we've survived together, we've actually built a bond together, let's not do this. He goes to the point where he even tries to off himself by using the sphere and letting it take him without taking anybody else. Now, this would be quite noble in a sacrifice, but Kanata isn't having any of it. Now, in this one episode, we learn so much about Charlce that it gives his character more dimension and more interesting characteristics. I wish we learned this a bit earlier, but obviously with him being the traitor, being the twist, I understand why they went to do it this way. And when he tries to sacrifice him at the end, he tries to sacrifice himself, he's actually filled with sadness and happiness and somewhat regret, because he's sad at everything that's gone on. He's happy because he's found Ares, who is the clone of Seriea, the one person that actually treated him with any sort of respect and kindness. And he's left with regret because he just wants to have fun with everybody else. He just wants to live that normal life. But he can't because of the way he was brought up and the way that his mind works. Next, Kanata, Ultimate Dive Bomber. I love the anger and the rage that Kanata showed in this episode. It was awesome. It was full of rage, but not in a way that he's actually mad. It was more like pity, like, you fool, why can't you see that so-and-so and so-and-so? Or like, we're friends and that. Much like Naruto and his dialogue when he always fights Sasuke. Naruto's like, we're friends, that's why we're doing this, rah. Bad example, I know. But understand, Kanata is far better than Naruto, in my personal opinion. And I just love the fact that he was like this. But despite all that sort of anger, Kanata still has it in him to save Charlce at the end. They're comrades. And he did promise to be his right-hand man, which is a good thing, because as not only Kanata would probably struggle to find real crew members because he's just crazy to work with, but in saving Charlce, it did cost him an arm. After jumping over the sphere and kind of leaping onto Charlce and holding it, he actually does lose his arm to the sphere. And when they show his arm floating in space, it was actually quite brutal. But there was one thing that I was kind of upset with. I'm just trying to find it because I should have, had it beforehand. But they didn't show this. They didn't show Kanata actually in pain. Well, they did kind of, but what happened was there was a red screen, and I'll admit that it was absolutely horrible to look at. And in doing so, they cut off Kanata kind of kneeling with the arm bleeding out, and that is one of my favourite panels from within the manga. And thanks to the red screen and censorshipping, we didn't get that. But we do get, some visuals of the arm floating in space, so we know that it's gone back to where it originally started. And we also know that, Quilterdine and Zack are both trying to help him. Everyone's trying to help Kanata kind of stay conscious and sort his arm out so he doesn't die. Next, Seriea, the original to Ares, and the most kindest and caring of all of the originals. As she is against this cloning thing, and she goes as far as shipping out her clone with Emma. So this is how we learn how Emma and Ares became mother and daughter. And despite her being told, that she has to have another clone, she refused. She even refused at the start, but they found DNA off some hairbrush or something. I don't really know if they clarified that. But one thing I will say is her design, being that of an older version of Ares, is actually really nice. I did like it. And if Ares turns out anything like her, then Kanata is going to be one lucky person. But her personality is very warm and comforting, unlike the other originals. But unfortunately, she gets pushed off a cliff, and thus she dies. This is obviously where Charlce gets thrown into confinement because the king is very upset. Now this episode is all about bonds, friendship, and changing oneself through trials and reflection. And this is basically what the show embodies. The show is about these kids that go on this journey, they get lost in space, and they learn more about themselves, and they get comfortable with themselves, and they grow along the process. And this episode encapsulates that very nicely. So if you haven't watched this episode yet, make sure you go and watch it. But be warned, make sure you bring a box of tissues with you, because it's a tearful one. Especially when we get to the Ares flashback, when we find out that Emma is not her real mum, and she's upset, but she's also thinking about the happy memories that Emma gave to her, because Emma raised Ares like any caring mother would. So, do we really care at this point that Emma isn't the biological mother of Ares? No, not really. And a great episode overall, and it looks like next week could be the last. So we end off with the crew kind of being all, not buddy-buddy as such, because it's the whole Kanata panicking thing, but the crew is now stable enough to kind of work together a bit more and to push through. Now I know this will be the part of the review where again I'll go over the manga, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I've been super busy. I've done 2 reviews in one day, which doesn't seem like a lot, but I have also had to do other things. So I haven't read the manga yet. Again, I've read it once, but I haven't reread it. So if you want to ask me any questions about the manga, put them down in the comment section below, but make sure not to spoil anything for the next episode. However, if you have any thoughts about this episode in particular, then again, let me know down below. If you've enjoyed, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you're new so you never miss a video from me, and until next time, I hope you'll have an amazing day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.